right, everybody. Welcome to episode 4 of the Firefighters Podcast. Joining me this week, as I've said in the beginning, a big part of the reason why I want to do this show in the first place is so I could share a platform with other people who have their own fights going on. Even though this one is kind of my fight too, but so yeah, I'm looking to pay it forward, for all the people that gave me and my friends a platform when we were fighting for 9/11 legislation. So this week I have fire wife and fire mom, Diane Cotter. Welcome.
Thank you, Rob.
So along those lines, before we get into your accidental activism, which is what I consider myself, an accidental activist, I kind of injected myself in there, much like you. I want to talk about something that I've wondered about, because my mom didn't live long enough to see me and my brother go to fires and have to live through that worry. And I know you lived through it with your husband, but was there a big difference when it was your son going to work as opposed to your husband?
Surprisingly, yes and no. My husband was on the rescue squad for over 25 years. So he's been on a very, very busy truck his entire career. And our son very recently got on to the fire department, and he absolutely loves it. And he hears it's like Paul never left, because I guess they're very similar in their mannerisms and their actions and escapades. So, but we couldn't be prouder of our son. Couldn't be prouder of our son for choosing the profession, even knowing what we know, what, he and every other firefighter are doing regarding the turnout gear. Because of our knowledge, we still wouldn't choose any other profession if we had to choose it for him. It's the best job in the world, without a doubt.
Right. We hear guys say that all the time about 9/11, knowing what we know now, we also would have went there anyway. It's just.
Rob, it's, to hear, I heard your interview last week with your brother, and I was just mesmerized because he brought up so many things that were so reminiscent to Paul and I. FDNY has always been such a huge friend of the Worcester Fire Department since the December 3rd, 99 Worcester Cold Storage fire, a warehouse fire. And Paul met such good friends, Bobby Knabe and Mickey Conboy, and this is difficult to talk about, but they invited us on September 9th, 1999, 2 days before 9/11, to come on a harbor cruise. I want to say with Big Blue, Rescue 2, 3.
I don't know. They all call themselves Big Blue. It could be any one of them. I don't know. 2 or 3, 4. I don't know.
We had the most gorgeous night with, a ton of drunk firefighters and their wives, and we were cruising up and down the Hudson. It was just beautiful. We stopped in front of the Statue of Liberty, and we really started singing "My Country 'Tis of Thee," and then your fire truck came and showered us. And Tommy Foley was dressed as a pirate, and he kept coming to check on us. And I kept thinking, boy, did his folks raise him good. He was so young. And we had an old retired guy with us, and he kept telling us about, we had this fire here at the Domino Sugar Plant and all of that. And then we went by the Twin Towers, and he said, yeah, and then we had the World Trade Center in 93. He said, and they'll be back.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
Yeah, I think we all expected that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you can't tell, Diane's from Worcester, Massachusetts. If you haven't picked up on her accent, and the fire she's referring to, I believe 6 firefighters
Yes.
made the ultimate sacrifice that day, which which is a pretty dark day in the history of the fire service. But so that was Paul's department.
Mm.
How did you feel about him going back to work after that? Was it were you a bit on edge, or did you just did it come
No,
with the
not
job?
on edge at all. It was part of being a firefighter's wife. You know what comes with the job. I can always remember every time that Paul left, he'd kiss me and he'd hug me so tight. And that kiss was in case it was the last kiss, just in case it was the last kiss.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, thankfully, he's still
Mm.
around to give you that kiss every day, right?
He does. And we do. Thankfully, we still really do enjoy each other's company.
All right. Well, you can tell me later what's really going on, but all right, so let's get right into it.
Mhm.
So Paul was forced to retire because he had cancer. Something
Yes.
we're seeing way too much of in the fire service, not just 9/11 related, just all related in all departments all over the country, big, small. It doesn't matter how many fires you've gone to, right? There doesn't
Right.
seem to be the contributing factor. So Paul retired with colon cancer. Is that correct?
Prostate
Prostate
cancer.
cancer? Okay.
Prostate cancer. He had no symptoms. He was diagnosed in November of 2014, 1 month after he made lieutenant. And he didn't even want to take the lieutenant's exam because he
Right.
loved the rescue so much. He just wanted to live out his career on the rescue. But, he was 25 years in, 27 years in, and really it was time for him to climb the ladder. And, he got the results of the that he passed, and he said, "Oh shit." I passed. But we were so proud for him that he was promoted. We had a beautiful ceremony in Worcester City Hall, and he was going for a pre-op physical for cataract surgery. He had no symptoms. He didn't have any of the, where you have to frequently urinate or you can feel something isn't right. He had none of that whatsoever. But his PSA was up slightly. He was having cataract surgery, so he had to get some pre-physical work done. And his PSA was up just a hair. And his physician said, "I want to check this, Paul. And the only way that we can check it is to get a biopsy." And sure enough, the biopsy came back with aggressive prostate cancer. He's from a big Irish Armenian family. He's probably got 19 first cousins, male first cousins. Nobody had prostate cancer. He's got 2 brothers, no prostate cancer. And Paul never returned to work after the diagnosis, after the surgery, I should say. The surgery left him, what we can tell you now, because, my husband never spoke about this. We kind of, he's such a big buff guy, he's a bear of a man. It left him incontinent. And David Furry did speak about that in our Men's Health magazine article. And I'm very proud of Paul for discussing that, because it's very difficult to discuss. All of you firefighters, men and women, you have a persona. And, for Paul to come out and say that it left him incontinent, I think is a very brave thing. We didn't even discuss that with our children. So it must be difficult for them to look at their, hero firefighter and understand this now. At any event, you can't return to the job when you're incontinent. You just can't do that job, right, with stress incontinence. So he did not return. He fell into a very deep depression. He was not ready to retire. And that depression compelled me to find out what was going on. I started to look at the gear itself, because Boston had come out with this magnificent video about firefighter cancer. And we knew all about firefighter cancer. Everybody knew about firefighter cancer. You just don't expect the really healthy guys to get it. You know, Paul was the bodybuilder, and, you know, he'd get on the loudspeaker and he'd say, everybody in the weight room now, we're going to lift like men. You know, I mean, he was that guy in the firehouse. And, you know, you'd like to challenge everybody to climb up the 3-story fire pole they have on Franklin Street. It's a unique firehouse, and that it has a 3-story pole.
Oh, wow.
To tease everybody that he's one of 2 guys that can climb it. But when he was in his reclining chair, falling into a deep depression, growing a beard, and, you know, I didn't recognize him. I was spending a hell of a lot of time on the computer researching firefighter cancer, and I came across something called a 1999 safety alert from the IAFF, and it was regarding the Breathe Text moisture barrier that the IAFF under Al Whitehead wanted to recall because they had been receiving information that the moisture barrier was breaking down. And I remember reading it and saying, oh my God, you mean the manufacturers are contesting this recall? And they were all contesting it. And the IAFF threatened legal action about it. So that was the first time I went like, what in the hell? I thought the manufacturers loved us. What's this? So then I started looking further and further at the information about the components of the gear itself, such as the Kevlar and the Nomex. And I came across this horrific incident where a New Jersey firefighter, his gear had degraded and he had succumbed to his steam burns.
Yeah, I remember that.
You remember that?
Yep.
Yep. I wish I could remember his name. I know I have it in my articles. At any event, that's what compelled me to start emailing and writing. And one of the people that I wrote to was Erin Brockovich. And I was telling her about this steam burn and this Nomex and Kevlar. She called in early March of 2017. She called and said, Diane, it's Erin Brockovich, and I've gotten your emails. She said, I'm laughing because I guess it's well known I send a lot of emails. And she said, I got a call from a New Hampshire fire chief who has 13 firefighters with cancer. And I didn't skip a beat. I said, that does not surprise me because every firehouse is a cancer cluster. And she said, does the gear have PFOA or PFOS? I'd never heard the words before. I hung up with her. Took me less than 5 minutes to see that Europe was already transitioning to what they called non-PFOA PPE. Now, just so you don't think that they have turnout gear without PFOA, they do not. They wear what you wear. And the stakeholders, which is the manufacturers, have been kicking that can down the road in Europe. At first, it was supposed to be out of their gear in 2020, and now it's like 2026. We're doing more here in the USA with our team of allies than Europe is doing right now. So at that point in time, I began to email the manufacturers, does our gear have this? And I'd get nice emails back. Everything complies with EPA standards. And I'd say, well, can you tell me what's in the gear? That's proprietary information. And we couldn't get answers. And what happened was I then started to reach out to the IAFF and I couldn't get answers. And I reached out to the NFPA and they told me they were a neutral organization and they couldn't get, you know, if I wanted to change something, I could write a TIA, which I did.
Of course.
Of course I did. In 2018, but they didn't accept it. They rejected it. But I had so many sign-ons by, Philippe Grandjean and Robert Ballot and Dr. Peasley, et cetera.
So just to back up, so people are aware, the EPA has proven by their own admission to have lied to the public,
Yes.
especially in regards to firefighters, right? In fact, their big lie was that the air at Ground Zero was safe to breathe, that, you had to wear a mask, but there would be no, side effects. However, there are other ways for all that stuff to get into your body, right? As we're seeing with the gear.
Absolutely.
So I just wanted to get that in there, that the EPA is not a trusted source when it comes to the safety of firefighters. Anyway.
Not at all. Not at all. On my Medium account, I wrote an article called EPA in the Pinky Swear. And what's stunning about that is that the DuPont's vice president, Susan Stelnecker, was commandeering the EPA to downplay the hazards of PFOA. And we can talk about that in something called the liability bill. You'll want to ask me about that because I think your listeners will be aghast at what we'll tell them with that. So I then decided, well, I can't get answers from anyone. I'm going to find out myself. Rob, I barely graduated high school because I used to get out of high school at 11 o'clock and go and work at the Liggett's drugstore where I was a waitress or a soda fountain girl, and so I didn't go to college. But I had some tenacity in me, and I purchased a set of new turnout gear, and I then needed to find someone to test it. And somehow I had anybody that was with a doctor and that was related to the fire service, that was a trusted source. I would email them, and my community of scientists would grow. And I said, can someone help me find someone that will test the gear? And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was Dr. Jeff Burgess, University of Arizona, who said, Diane, I think you can try Dr. Graham Peasley. He's a nuclear physicist. What am I doing talking to a nuclear physicist? So I emailed him. He couldn't have been kinder. He couldn't have been more of a teacher. He told me how to send him the samples. I sent him the samples from the turnout gear.
And he's at Notre Dame, correct?
Notre Dame, absolutely. Yep,
right.
Fighting Irish.
All right.
And back comes his email, which I don't understand anything that he's writing. I only understand that it sounds very concerning to him. And that was very concerning to me. And he said, you may want to do a bigger study. Me, I have no money. I have no resources. How am I going to do a bigger study? Well, by this time, John Marr, the editor of Station Pride, had published something he named The Real Cancer in Your Gear. And, I spent a lot of time on social media boxing with the media community because they just wouldn't talk about this. And John said to shut me up. He kind of just went along with me that he was going to publish it. And then he said, but I got to fact check everything, Diane, about your article. And if it's true, then this is going to rock the fire service. He did. He fact checked everything. And then he published The Real Cancer in Your Gear in March of 2017 or 2018. I've forgotten now. And we watched it shared thousands of times. Not one comment, not one person would write a comment, but they were tagging each other in fire departments. And that's when the big, huge denials began. But that's also when people began reaching out to me. Firefighter Jeff Kanabe from Northern California, who's our PPE specialist. Mitch Huner from Chicago Fire Department, Salem, Massachusetts, Ryan Riley. These are health and safety officers. And they said, we'll do whatever we can to help you. And so then I thought, we can do a bigger study because we have Graham who will do it with us. And he wasn't charging us anything to work, but we did have to get funding because these very comprehensive lab studies analysis, they're very expensive. So Paul and I reached out to my very good friend and mentor, Kathy Crosby Bell of Last Call Foundation, honoring firefighter Michael Kennedy in Boston. And we then traveled to Florian Hall and met Kathy, and she was on board right away and, compelled her board of directors to fund the study for us. In preparation for what we saw was coming with the study, which we were now learning from Graham through various phone calls, that yes, he found PFOA in everything. And PFOA is the known carcinogen that causes testicular cancer and causes kidney cancer. And Rob Bilott explains it much better than I ever will, if you've ever heard Rob speak about this.
So the people know Robert Bilott is the movie Dark Waters is based on him, right? Mark Ruffalo plays him. So if you don't know who Robert Bilott is, check him out. Righteous dude. Sorry.
Righteous dude. Righteous dude. And one more thing, if you're going to check out Dark Waters, check out Rob's book Exposure, and you go to page 174 of Exposure, and in that he writes that DuPont did a study that said that PFOA will go through all PPE material or all glove material. So that was back in, I think, 1980 that they knew that. But at any event, so we began preparing the fire service for what we knew was coming, because we had a heads up from Graham. He was trying to educate us in our little committee, and we'd ask Graham to talk to everybody. I mean, poor Graham, he's gotten, spread so thin in the fire service, but people needed to hear it from him and not some fireman's wife. And he's been so good. Our friends at Fire Engineering, I have to say, I spoke online. I was really giving Bobby Halton a hard time about not picking up this mantle. And one day he wrote to me, Diane Cotter, I am not hard to find. Here's my cell phone. So I picked up the cell phone and called him. And if you've ever had the pleasure to talk with Bobby Halton, you could talk for hours to that man. He's brilliant. Bobby then gave us a platform on fire engineering with PJ Norwood and Frank Ricci, who have been phenomenal at interviewing our allies and adversaries in this issue. And
which is important, I think, is to get the opinion of the other side.
You have to.
And I always found they gave me more ammunition, and they kind of dug their own hole, right?
True. This is true. But you can't have a conversation with just one side. You have to have it with both sides. In all fairness, you have to.
Right.
Because you can't think that you know it all. You just can't. But our study, I then began reaching out to the IAFF. I swear it's going to get twisted.
That's all right. I have my own issues with them also.
So at that time, the IAFF was under the presidency of Harold Schaeferger. And what began in 2017 with conversations with Pat Morrison, who was the assistant to the general president for health and safety on this issue, were confusing. Pat went right directly to DuPont and others after the Real Cancer in Your Gear came out to ask them if your gear was okay. He then printed their response as his response, but it was a statement that told you nothing to worry about, nothing to see here, everything. Yeah. So then we had a conversation with him in which we said, Pat, this is bullshit. This is you called DuPont to ask them. That's crazy.
Right.
And he said, well, I'm going to reword it and I'm going to fix the statement. That never happened. My longtime ally, Jason Burns from Fall River, he reached out to me in 2017 after I started my social media campaign, and Jason had just buried 2 30-something firefighters as the president of Fall River, a very poor town in Massachusetts, local 1314. He had less than a year on the presidency, and he buried 2 young 30-somethings with rare brain cancer. He said, give me everything you have, Diane. I'm going to Washington, D.C., and I'm going to find out what's what. So he took all my material. He went to Washington, D.C., and he said, we caught them with their pants down. He said, either they didn't know or they knew and they're hiding that they knew. My perception is that if they didn't know, they went on a mass campaign of a shell game with the fire service, because 9 days after the Real Cancer in Your Gear was published, Lion Gear sent a series of emails to their vendors that we're going to need ammunition. We're going to need ammo. And they quickly devised something that you stupid firefighters hopefully would believe. And that was that the studies by Patagonia Rainwear show nothing to worry about. Now, that was such an ambush of the fire service, I can't tell you, because they mistook how smart firefighters really are, how brilliant they are, how inquisitive they are.
And how relentless they are.
And how relentless they are, exactly. And in that, they wanted to make sure that their teams were aligned to go along with this promulgation of a dialogue that they were going to dictate. There was no science. That was 9 days after the Real Cancer in Your Gear came out in 17 or 18. But they were already formulating a plan. We then began seeing their promulgation right directly out of the words of Pat Morrison of the IAFF. In 2019, Graham gave his preliminary results at FDIC. He was invited by Bobby Halton himself, which I can't say enough about Bobby, because think of a position that Bobby's in, where he's the editor-in-chief of, Fire Engineering and Firefighter Nation and FDIC, and he has to work with the manufacturers, but he also has a moral capacity with the entire fire service. So Bobby and Graham began communicating and educating each other on each other's, specialties, the PFAS and the fire service. And Bobby invited Graham to speak at FDIC, and I was there that first year that he spoke, and he gave a great dissertation, and in the audience was Lion Gear in the team. Lion then asked Graham if they could come to his lab. So Graham's lab is like this wizardry lab at Notre Dame. He hand built this machine. I don't know what you call it. Machine doesn't give it justice. I'll tell you, it takes up 3 rooms. It's coils, it's glass, it's metal, it's, things that go boom, boom, bang, bang. It's just crazy what Graham built by his own hands, but it measures PFAS. And the Lion team flew in April of 2019. Graham hosted them. Graham told him he found PFOA in everything on a 20-year span of 30 sets of turnout gear, both new and decommissioned. That was our study. And Graham said, except a 2017 moisture barrier, which has staggering amounts of the replacement chemicals. He said, but I also want you to know that there is a precursor that is forming the chemical PFOA in hours to days by oxidation. So technically, if the manufacturers can say we don't make it with it, they're just leaving out that part that it's forming PFOA. Okay, so now this is where it's going to get twisted.
If it wasn't already.
If it wasn't already. Then Lion Gear distributes all you need to know about PFOA. Someone sends me this distribution, and it's in a PDF file, and in it I see the IAFF has read our study, because Lion Gear did their own study, and supports our study that there is little to no concern here. Well, I saw that, and I think I orbited the planet, a dozen times. Wow. My colleague in Northern California, Jeff Kanabi, demanded to see that report. Lion Gear's Andy Schwartz and his legal team flew from Ohio, Dayton, Ohio, to Northern California to show our PPE specialists the report, their study that they conducted. It was conducted by Exponent. So you're probably familiar with Deflategate, I want to imagine.
A little bit, yeah.
This is the group that did Deflategate, that
Right.
study. So it's a consulting group. It's not a peer-reviewed study. When we found that out, we were aghast, because we're thinking, well, the IAFF is only gonna, accommodate a peer-reviewed study. And that did not happen. So what happened was they took this Lion Gear Exponent study and made it into something that they put their name on. While in California, a third party called in. It was Dr. Paul Krastowski, and he said, you don't have to worry, Jeff Kanabi, because those chemicals are too big to pass through your skin. They're like volleyballs and tennis balls. Remember that. They're like volleyballs and tennis balls. Fast forward now to January of 2020, and the IAFF is doing a Facebook Live event with Raquel Segal, who was the health and safety occupational specialist, Pat Morrison, your health and safety wizard. And in that, they're talking about PFAS. I'm watching it. My friend in California, Jeff, is watching it. And doesn't Raquel Segal say, you don't have to worry about the PFAS in the gear because it's like volleyballs and tennis balls. It's too big to go through your skin. My phone rings. It's Jeff Kanabi. He says, are you watching this? I said, oh my God, they are. They really are. They've sold us out. That's when Ed Kelly entered the picture. And Ed Kelly has done more in 6 months than Harold Schaitberger did on this issue in 6 years. And of course, we had our team from Nantucket, Chief Mitchell now, and Jason Burns, who were fighting their own battles and who constructed the resolution to remove DuPont and 3M from your IAFF cancer summits.
So people know Ed Kelly is the newly elected president of the International Association of Firefighters. He's from Boston. Sounds a little bit like Mayor Quimby. But he's a good dude. I met him a couple times, and he's the only high-ranking official from the IAFF that ever approached me when I was lobbying in Washington, and I always appreciated that. He gave me his card, told me to call him any day, all day, all night. He was there to back me up, and I always appreciated that, and that stuck with me. I think he was, what was he, the treasurer or recording secretary or
Yeah, he
something?
was General Secretary Treasurer of the IAFF.
Right.
And he discovered that Harold Schaitberger was taking a pension for 20 years from the IAFF while working in the IAFF for 20 years.
Right. Double dipping, as we call it.
There you go.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right. So I think we're starting to see who the bad actors have been all these years, and it sounds a bit familiar to me. Seems like the same people. Um, why do you think that is, that firefighters took so long? Like, this is what I always struggled with this with the 9/11 issues, is why did firefighters take so long to get on board? When you have somebody in there for 20 years who seems to be acting not in the best interest of the members, what
I can tell you why, Rob, because
let's hear it, because I can't figure it out.
it's it's called the shunning. You can't speak out against your union leadership. You just can't. And my husband was retired, and we spoke out, and we paid a very heavy price for speaking out. I received a call from my husband's own union, the Professional Firefighters of Massachusetts. Rich McKinnon called me after a blog was posted about me, and I reposted it. And he said, "We'll have nothing more to do with you. You posted that blog, and I'm very disappointed in you." And I said, "Well, you know that Harold Schaitberger has done nothing to work with us or to move this issue forward." So I didn't play by the rules of the union. As an outsider, I had my own rules. And
Sure.
because I was outspoken, my husband's members of his own union and throughout Massachusetts were told not to associate with us. And it hit home when Paul and I went before the Massachusetts state legislation in September of 2019 to give a testimony for the removal of PFAS from turnout gear, a bill that we worked hand in hand with the PFFM on, a bill that I provided quite a lot of background information on, because I'd become not knowledgeable, but I knew where the facts were that I could send to legislators and to allies that wanted help with this issue. When Paul and I arrived at the Boston State House, Paul went to park the Jeep at a fire station. He left me off in front of the State House, and I was carrying the turnout gear because I was going to give a testimony for my ally Jim Hawkins, who wrote our bill to remove PFAS from gear to make it the strongest in the nation. And upon entering the State House, I met my good friend Paul Jack, who greeted me and said, "Oh, Diane, you're here." And I said, "Yes, well, we weren't invited, but we're here nonetheless." And we rode the elevator together, and Paul then excused himself because he had a phone call to make. And I then met Jim Hawkins in the vestibule of the stateroom. He told me what to expect, and he was happy to see me, and who the opposition was that would be there. And I opened the door to the room, and standing in front of me, 20 feet in front of me, was Rich McKinnon, the president of the PFFM, Commissioner Joe Finn, the secretary, I forget his name, and the legislative agent for the Boston Firefighters Union. And everyone stared, and Rich McKinnon and I locked eyes like two dinosaurs, I'll say. And neither one of us acknowledged the other with a smile. No one acknowledged me at all. I went to the front of the room and sat alone in a bench by myself till my husband came. And I was so very glad he didn't see that welcome that I had received. We gave our testimony. After the testimony, everybody left. And on the ride home, I received a call from my ally who said, "How did it go?" I said, "It went great. You should have heard how the senators grilled the Fluoro Council rep, who said that it's PFAS is so great that we use it in your turnout gear." And they asked her, "Did you ever hear about West Virginia? You really don't believe what you're telling us, do you?" And I wanted to crawl under the floor for her. I was so embarrassed for her. I said, "But no one acknowledged Paul or me." And my ally became wildly upset. And he said, "We were all told to stay away from you. We were told not to have anything to do with you." And he said, "I told them I was working with you. You've been screaming for our help for 3 years." So that's how your union worked under Schaetberger.
Mhm.
And that's why when people went to ask, are the Cotters crazy? Is this true? I believe they were told, "Well, we're still waiting on information. We're still waiting on more studies. And we have the exponent study by Lion Gear." Now you have a new president, and his stance is extremely different. Like he said during his speech with Environmental Working Group, "It defies logic. The gear that's meant to protect us may likely be killing us."
Yeah, and just so people know, it's not only firefighters gear that these chemicals are in. It's also military gear, in firefighting foam, um,
There you go.
and everyday products as it is. So you multiply that by however much more they put in our gear, right? More so than the shirt I'm wearing. It's got to
Oh,
be good.
that's Rob, the thing that Dr. Peasley found out now, picture this, is that your 10-year-old gear still has enough PFAS to meet NFPA standards. So what that says to me as a layperson is our firefighters have been pawns of a horrific game, because what a place to hide these chemicals if you're DuPont, because you firefighters all get cancer, but
Yeah.
you've been told all your cancers are from products of combustion or toxic smoke.
Right, and especially in the last 50 years with all the plastics that are in fires now, they burn much hotter, so it's an easy way out. But as I alluded to earlier, these cancers aren't just happening in New York and Boston and Chicago and the places that Detroit that are doing all the work. It's happening in, small volunteer companies that don't really see much fire duty. So
Right.
what's the common denominator here? It's the gear. And as I mentioned last week, I don't understand why everyone is still wearing this gear for non-emergency use. Um, it makes my blood boil. I can imagine I just saw it yesterday when they had the Tunnel to Towers run, and I saw thousands of people running in firefighter gear, and it breaks my heart, and it makes me scream at the television like, "What the fuck are you doing?
Right,
Aren't you
Rob.
listening?" Well,
Right.
it's the ironic part is they're running for the people like me that got sick from
9/11.
right, and it's mind-boggling.
And we see that, and we're so sensitive to that because the message is so powerful that it sends, that you're running in this badass gear that looks so amazing. And for years, it was the greatest visual that you could ever imagine, the stair climbs, all of it. But even Bobby Halton said, don't wear it unless you're at a fire.
Right.
And, we have to be careful even with the baby pictures and the kids. And, I love seeing firefighters in the grocery store wearing their bunker pants. I love it. It's the greatest thing ever, but in my mind, I'm thinking you're touching your pants and these measurable amounts of this known carcinogen is coming right off on your hands and you're going to eat a sandwich.
And also, it's like wearing a snowsuit, right? So you're warm, your body's sweating, your pores are wide open, especially in the
Your
areas that you
groin.
discussed, your groin.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know.
It's so frustrating. And, all of our allies are saying, please don't wear it. But this is why I go back to, we are owed an investigation into this issue on the scale of the 9/11 Commission. But Rob, our congressionals, they don't want to rock the boat. They don't want, because we're asking for who knew what and when did they know it,
Right.
which is not just DuPont and 3M and Lion Gear. It's the IAFF and it's the NFPA. But if you're a congressman, congresswoman, or a senator, it's a nice sound bite for you to get up and shake your finger at DuPont and 3M.
Yeah.
But you'll be goddamned if you're going to call out the IAFF. You're not going to do it. You're not going to do it because you want that union leadership with you when you run again. You want the body of the IAFF to sign on to your legislation. And for the past 20 years, while Schaetberger was at the helm, he was very well known and respected and admired in DC. Nobody would touch the IAFF. I have 100 requests in for congressional hearings. I'm probably being, a conservative there. None of my legislators will touch the IAFF. None of them.
It doesn't surprise me. And they don't want to miss out on their opportunity for their photo ops, especially in September and November, which seems to be when politicians care about firefighters, right?
Correct.
Those two specific times a year, people could figure out why. I just wanted to go back because when you said the shunning, it said something off of me, because that seems to be like their number one defense, right? Is they paint you out if you speak up or you call out a politician, their main defense is to call you crazy or to say, you're a criminal. Like James DeDroga himself, the 9/11 bill is named after James DeDroga. And if people would look up his story, it's absolutely sickening the way Detective DeDroga was treated. It all started because he was trying to get his pain meds covered. He was suffering from stage 4 cancer, which we now know was caused by his time spent at Ground Zero. And all he wanted was his, cancer is expensive, all these drills and all these pills and chemo treatments, and nobody wanted to pay for it. They're saying it's not service connected, even though the EPA had already admitted what they admitted, and we all knew about the 160 toxins in the air and 400 tons of we knew why he had cancer. But the city's stance was to paint him out to be a drug addict. And I believe Mayor Bloomberg said, we're not going to pay for a drug addict's drugs. And it was on the cover of the news. Right. And so then once they acknowledged that he wasn't a drug addict and, he was right, it was on page 47 in a small column. The retraction was nowhere near what he deserved, which is now
what he suffered.
What he suffered, in his dying days. Fortunately, a lot of people made sure that his legacy was restored, and his daughter now knows that her father was a hero and not, in fact, a drug addict who just wanted some quality of life. So that's what Diane's talking about. That's the stuff that happens. You're fortunate that your husband was retired, but had he been active, I'm sure he would have been lifted out of his spot. He would have been transferred to the, the last firehouse he probably wanted to go to, or maybe even put on administrative duty, or they would have done everything to force him to want to retire, right? Because that's what they do. And they in turn turn the members against you by making it seem like you're a shit stirrer, or you're just looking
Mhm.
to get yours, which is what I found in the beginning. Before, I got sick early on in this whole thing, and it was hard. Even people who knew me thought that I was full of shit or making it up, because we weren't seeing it. Now we're at the point where every firehouse has 20, 30 guys suffering from 9/11 illnesses, so it's not even a
Right.
question. But back then it was, what is this guy up to? And that's what they do, and that's how they get away with it. You're right. Um, so
You're right, Robin. They asked me, a mentor, a mentor called me one day and said, there's been a discussion and the union will accommodate you if you remove your derogatory posts about the union and if you apologize to the union. And my mentor said, I doubt she's going to do that. And I said, she's not going to do that.
no, no,
No.
you're the one who's owed the apology.
Mhm.
All right. Well, another question I wanted to ask you, because I know this is a long episode, and I thank everyone for listening, but I don't think there's a more important topic when discussing firefighters today. Um, but this is a personal question, because I'm suffering a lot of autoimmune issues from 9/11. Um, so are you guys finding any of that, and specifically in women, in your studies? Because I know with the 9/11 issues, the women are, even non-first responders, are suffering a lot of those issues, and it's not getting a lot of coverage.
So the autoimmune issues, I'm not wildly familiar with, but I can tell you what we do know about these PFAS chemicals is they change everything. They bind to your blood. They pass the brain blood barrier. They circulate again and again and again in your system. So if there's something that can be changed in you, these PFAS chemicals will try to do that,
Right.
and they never leave your system. The reproductive cancers we're very concerned about, the brain cancers. I'm not wildly familiar, Rob, with the autoimmune effects of PFAS. I wish I could tell you I knew more about that, but I don't. If you give me some examples of autoimmune diseases, I can tell you if I know about them specifically.
Parkinson's, diabetes. I know
There,
we're seeing a lot of ALS now,
yes. Oh,
dementia,
yes.
accelerated rates of dementia, and
So
Alzheimer's.
So the Parkinson's, there's been some links affiliated with PFAS and the Parkinson's. ALS, the links are there affiliated. In the diabetes, well, cholesterol is a very big, that was one of the, high cholesterol was also one of the findings of the C8 science panel that Rob Balot put together.
Mhm.
So it reaches far past cancer, to
Sure.
be quite
Celiac
honest.
is a big one too. I know a lot of firefighters who have digestive issues. For
Mhm.
me, cutting out gluten made a huge difference, and I didn't have that my whole life. I
Wow.
I could eat
Yeah.
pizza and drink beer my whole life, and then all of a sudden I couldn't anymore.
Yeah,
So,
ulcerative colitis
yeah.
is one of the findings of the C8 science panel as well. So we really need a repository for all of this information. But you've got great organizations that are working on this now. You've got the San Francisco Firefighter Cancer Prevention Foundation is doing many studies. The IAFF is about to announce the results of the studies that they've done with Jennifer Field from University of Oregon that Graham Peasley was involved in. Last Call Foundation is working on firefighter studies on this. University of Arizona, and Graham Peasley and I worked with Senator Jean Shaheen for the National Institute of Science and Technology Studies. And she's provided over $1 million for studies on your turnout gear. And it's a 3-year project. So you're going to see that. And our friends at Nantucket PFAS Action Group are doing a whole comprehensive study on all of their firefighters and PFAS. And you can watch for those results over the coming years as well.
Awesome. Are there any other, do we have any other allies in Congress?
We do. We have many allies in Congress on writing forward-looking legislation.
Right.
Everybody's happy to do that. We have Senator Shaheen, and it's bipartisan. And the allies that I work closest with are Senator Shaheen, Senator Hassan, Jim McGovern, Dan Kildee, Brian Fitzpatrick, Debbie Dingell. There's so many on both sides, so I'm remiss to leave out names. But again, give us what we are owed, and give us the investigation into who knew what and when they knew it.
Right. So what can my listeners do to encourage those members of Congress to maybe have the intestinal fortitude to do more than just write a little piece of forwarding information? Like how can they push them across the line?
Follow us on social media. So on our my name is Your Turnout Gear. That's on Twitter. We also have a Facebook page, Your Turnout Gear and PFOA. We have a website, Your Turnout Gear and PFOA.com. And what we'll do there is provide the launching pad for you to get involved. And we actually had a petition signed by over 10,000 names for an investigation, and we handed it to our congressionals and it went nowhere. So that says a lot.
So
yeah.
Let's get it to 100,000 then.
We need
keep it going.
100,000, and we do need the help of the names like Ed Kelly.
Yeah.
I think will get us there for these hearings. And we are working behind the scenes on some aspects that we're not able to tell you about right now. But, I think that people should look at suing these corporations as well. And, if you've been harmed by the chemicals and you have that chemical in your blood, you should speak with an attorney in New York. We worked for 2 years. We worked with Keith Sullivan of Sullivan and Galashaw, and we now know that Pritzker and Levine in California has announced a lawsuit in California. And recently on fire engineering, they announced that there were lawsuits forming in Massachusetts and New York. So you want to watch these. Whenever we have news, we post it on our websites, and our allies cross post it. So follow us on social media, and it's a pretty active scene.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. I know that's a lot of information for everyone to take in. That's kind of the cliff notes of what's happening. But the bottom line is, once again, there's some shady stuff going on, and it's our firefighters holding the bag, which seems to be a theme in this show and my life.
Right.
But please follow Diane. Start contacting your members of Congress. You've all been so supportive of us over the last 20 years, and we need your help. And as Diane said, if you're a firefighter, please stop wearing your gear unless you absolutely have to. Even if you don't know, even if you can't read Graham Peasley's study and understand what he's saying, that's the bottom line, right? Just protect yourself and each other. So spread that word. Follow us. I'm going to share Diane's The Real Cancer in Your Gear later today. So follow me at Sarah Robb. Thank you to Diane for coming on. I believe she is a carrier of the light, And sometimes that's not enough, right? Sometimes we need to shine that light where it belongs.
Right,
And
Rob.
she's a badass and she's doing awesome shit. And, you know, we're lucky to have you. So thank you.
Beyond humbled, Rob. We're so grateful for everything that your organization has done. And we've just been the strongest supporters of the Ray Pfeiffer organization forever. So it was wonderful to connect with you when you and I connected over a year ago on this issue. So I'm so grateful for your work.
Well, thank you. And I'm here. Whatever you need from me, you know how to get in touch with me.
That
You know, if you want me to come and shame some politicians with you,
we do.
my,
As
it's
a
my
matter of fact.
all right. Well, that's my favorite pastime. So
Love it.
I'm
Let's do
in.
it.
Hit me
Thank
up.
you, Rob.
All right. Thanks, Diane. Have a good one. Oh, and
Okay.
by the way, I wore this Yankee hat for you. I didn't want
Don't
to
think
bring it
I
up.
didn't notice that.
Little 3-game sweep by the boys.
Next time you come up to Boston, we'll show you around.
All right. I'm in. All
Thanks,
right.
Rob.
Thanks again. Be well.
You too.